We spent the first day of our vacation with Lauren in Doylestown. Since I'd taken Sunday off, we were able to go to church with Lauren at Doylestown Presbyterian Church. It's a nice-sized church with an older sanctuary, though I think it had been updated fairly recently, and a newer wing that was built on the next block over. They connected the two buildings with a raised walkway, which was kind of cool. We were really impressed with the facility and with how they seemed to have embraced Lauren as a new member. One note of interest was that you had to walk through the cemetery to enter through the front doors of the church, and it was kind of funny that Lauren apparently never uses that entrance, but goes through a side door instead, so she won't have to walk through the cemetery. On day 2, we headed to Todd's parents' house in Waynesboro. You may recall that Todd had spent a few days there earlier in the month, tearing out the basement floor and pouring fresh cement. So here we are checking out the final product. It's not quite a perfect job, but so much better than what had previously been there. It was dangerously cracked and uneven, so this was much better. We ate dinner with Todd's parents at their favorite diner. Boy, we all look pretty old there, don't we? The next morning we set off for Farmington, PA, but took a quick detour to see our old friend Wayne, who was the church choir director all through Todd's childhood at their church. Wayne has moved into a retirement community near Waynesboro, and his little condo is just beautiful. We had lunch on his back patio, which was quite literally at the foot of a mountain. After lunch, we headed west to find the little vacation house we'd rented through Vrbo. It cost about the same as a fairly nice hotel, but we had the 2-bedroom house to ourselves, complete with a creek and a little waterfall right outside the back door. That was honestly probably our favorite part of the whole vacation. It makes you wonder if they ever experienced flooding, being that close to the water. But if they had experienced it, we certainly didn't see evidence of it. The house wasn't fancy, but it had everything you could need. Dishes and silverware, pots and pans and cooking utensils, and a dishwasher and towels and sheets, you name it. It was there. Even down to sticks to use at the fire pit for s'mores. We took advantage of that every day. The creek was running higher than normal due to all of the recent rain, so traversing the creek bed was a little bit sketchy. But after we made a trip to Walmart to buy some water shoes, we managed to conquer it. Boy, was that water cold. I guess you might say the house was in the middle of nowhere, but you didn't have to travel far to get to Uniontown, which had any store or restaurant you could want. But the house itself was off of a kind of a gravel road. There were houses there, but you didn't really notice them when you were at the house. You couldn't see or hear anything else, so kind of felt like you were in the middle of nowhere. On day 4, we made the 20-minute or so drive to see Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. It was an absolutely beautiful day, which made the tour even more enjoyable. They started construction on the house in 1936, and it was pretty neat to see how forward-thinking the architect had been that long ago. The architecture was interesting, but the best thing was the setting. Of course. So we really enjoyed taking a little hike through the forest to get to the good photo spot. Another couple happened to be there at the same time, so they took a quick picture for us, and then we took one for them. On the way back to the rent house, we stopped at a little store/eatery in Ohiopyle, which was a hot spot for whitewater rafters and hikers. We did not take advantage of that, but we did grab a bite to eat and sat at a picnic bench to watch the comings and goings. We also stopped at Laurel Caverns, which is apparently Pennsylvania's largest cave, with over 4 miles of passages. The tour was maybe 45 minutes long and had a few tightish passageways, but it only covered a small portion of the cave's entirety. After the tour, you were allowed to go out on your own throughout the cave to see a lot more of it, but that was as long as your knees and your heart were okay with climbing 17 flights of steps. So we decided to take a pass on that. But it was still fun and well worth the $13 for admission. Day 5 took us to Pittsburgh to tour the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. Their theme this summer was Jungle Quest, so many of the different greenhouses had hidden, or not so hidden, jungle animals, which were made of natural materials. It was really quite nice, though we did get stuck behind a school trip group from time to time, which made us want to just breeze through some spots to get away from the noise. The butterfly house was really neat, and I managed to get a few clips of some of the butterflies. We lunched in Pittsburgh at a diner that had been featured on Food Network's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. The food was fine, but I'm not sure it lived up to the hype. After the hour and a half or so drive back to the house in Farmington and a quick cat nap, we toured Fort Necessity National Battlefield, which was only a few miles away. It was the site of George Washington's first military encounter and his only surrender, and was the opening action of the French and Indian War. We were really impressed with the visitor center and the grounds. And here's a little video that describes the history behind the battle site.
The Battle of Fort Necessity occurred on July 3rd, 1754. 1754, we have 3 cultures that are coming into conflict here in the Ohio River Valley. That's where this National Park Service site sits. We're about 60 miles south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. We're not very far from the West Virginia line. But in 1754, according to the British, this was considered Virginia. According to the French, coming down from Canada, this was part of New France. And we have American Indians who've been living in this area for nearly 10,000 years. So when 3 groups want the same thing, there's bound to be a conflict. A young Virginian named George Washington was given that assignment in the spring of 1754 to build a military supply road to the forks of the Ohio, or what today we call Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's what the British were hoping to build, a fort, and they needed to have that road to get to that fort. Unfortunately for the British, the French would win out in that race and build a much larger fort there called Fort Duquesne. Washington, who was aware of that, still decided to build that road for future operations. And during the process of building the road, he comes to this area that we're standing in right now. This is called the Great Meadows. And in the midst of this meadow is where Washington would camp. And it's very easy to look at this area and think, boy, this is not a good place to camp. But consider that you have 300 soldiers that you have to provide food for, have a place to camp, a place they can defend themselves. This is not a bad site. It offered forage for his animals. He had approximately 60 head of cattle. He also had horses that were pulling those supply wagons. It also allowed him a clear field of fire should he be attacked. Now, Washington would build a supply base here, and it began with a very simple stockade and a cabin. Behind me, you see the reconstruction of that, and it's based on the archaeology that's been done through the 20th century. Inside, Washington would build a 14 by 14 log cabin, and that cabin's purpose was quite simple. It protected the perishable supplies. So it was not an office for Washington, it was not a barracks for the men. It's simply a large closet to make sure the gunpowder, the rum, the cornmeal, the flour are all out of the elements. So this really is not a place of refuge for the soldiers to fight from. What they would have fought from were the creek beds. Behind the stockade, you can kind of see the high shrubs. That outlines what's called Great Meadows Run. That basically bisects this meadow. And then directly ahead of me is Indian Run. And they come together, about 60 yards in the direction I'm pointing. And Washington, when he first sets up camp here, says that with nature's assistance, he has been given natural entrenchments. The grassy outline you see here kind of forms two V's, but formed together creates a big square. Those are where the breastworks would have been. This is the true part of the fort right here. And it faces those areas. You know, we have a nice long trench here and a nice long trench there because the tree lines come the closest in those two areas. The muskets had a limited range, about 60 to 80 yards effectively. Well, the tree line's about 60 yards on that side and 80 yards on that side. And if Washington had that crystal ball that told him he was going to have to fight here in July, he probably would have taken the time to clear the woods a little bit further back. But again, he never anticipated having to fight here. He's camped here from the end of May to about mid-June. He receives reinforcements, and he actually would push westward building his road. By the end of June, he gets word that the French are now coming after him because, well, at the end of May, he had attacked a French patrol. That's known as the Jumonville Affair. And so the French are coming after him for revenge. He tries to get out of the area. This is all the further he would get in his retreat. And out of necessity, he ends up having to fight here. And on the morning of July 3rd, the French do appear at the far end of the meadow. The French take advantage of the tree lines and quickly surround Washington, and Washington and his men would fight from these trenches during 8 to 9 hours of rain, heavy downpours, mist, fog, not the best conditions to fight in with the weapons of that time. They tend to misfire. So he figures he's going to get wiped out. But by 8 o'clock in the evening, he is surprised from the French who call out to him to see if he wants to talk surrender. And he's a little suspicious, but he does take up their offer, and over the course of 3 to 4 hours, the French do negotiate what's considered an honorable surrender during a time when there is no declared war. But it also says in that document that Washington is responsible for the assassination of a French diplomat. So it gives the French justification to show the world that they were justified in their attack, their retribution against Washington. So I hope this gives you a nice orientation to what occurred here and what the battlefield looks like. Again, I invite you to come and visit our site. We are open every day of the year except for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. The grounds are open sunrise to sunset, and the visitor center will have limited hours, again, depending on the season. So always check ahead of time before coming to visit us. This has been Brian Reedy here at Fort Necessity National Battlefield. Take care.
And finally, on day 6, we were headed back over the mountains towards home. Here are just a few video clips from the drive. And sorry in advance for the dirty windshield.